When the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy was questioned by the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee about Gaza last year, he let slip a telling quote. He said he couldn't confirm there was looting of aid supplies because there were no journalists in the territory. Lammy meant no foreign journalists, no real journalists, because they were refused entry by Israel. But his stumble was revealing. Furthermore, he may yet prove to be right. At the rate at which Israeli forces are killing Palestinian journalists in Gaza, 245 by one count and more than 273 by another, there will soon be no journalists left to record the genocide taking place in real time. That is the outcome that some Israeli journalists pray for. This was starkly apparent from their reaction to the targeted killings on Monday of Middle East Eye journalists Mohamed, Salama and Ahmed Abu Aziz, along with Reuters photojournalist Hussam al-Masri, freelance reporter Moaz Abu Taha and Mariam Dagga. They really didn't like their Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling the double-tap bombing of Nasser hospital a tragic mishap, because for them it was neither tragic nor a mishap. Channel 14 reported military sources as saying the attack killed terrorists disguised as journalists. The sources said that soldiers targeted a Hamas terror headquarters in Nasser hospital. Soldiers involved in the attack said it had been approved and coordinated with the senior command, and they knew about it before it was carried out. Zvi Yehezkeli, the Arab Affairs correspondent for I-24 News, praised the killings in Khan Yunis. He said, "These are Nukba men in every way," referring to the slain journalists as members of an elite Hamas military unit. "If Israel decides to eliminate the journalists, then it's better late than never," he said. Yehezkeli, a settler living in occupied West Bank, is at least being honest. That is more than can be said for the Reuters and for AP, two organisations that used the work of these slain journalists and for whom they should feel a duty of care. Apparently not. Both reported, without qualification, the Israeli military's ever-changing excuse for targeting the hospital, that the Golani Brigade was targeting a camera used by Hamas. This provides no explanation for the second strike 15 minutes after the first, which wiped out the local press corps. In reporting this claim straight, as if Israel had the right to balance the assertion that the journalists were targeted with its own fabrication, Reuters and AP offered no account of the fact that this Hamas camera could indeed have been the camera set up for Reuters to use as a live feed. This is at least the picture that emerges from video footage of the aftermath of the carnage and the balcony where the journalists were killed. Reuters editor-in-chief Alessandra Galloni and AP executive editor Julie Pace professed outrage in a joint statement. So why did Reuters, AP and of course the BBC initially report Israel's claim that these journalists were legitimate targets without challenging such an account? For some photographers working for Reuters, enough was enough. Valerie Zink cut up her Reuters press card and posted a public farewell on Monday, referencing coverage of both the killing of Al Jazeera journalist al-Sharif earlier this month and the double-tap strikes at the Nasser hospital. She wrote, "When Israel murdered al-Sharif, together with the entire Al Jazeera crew in Gaza City on August the 10th, Reuters chose to publish Israel's entirely baseless claim that al-Sharif was a Hamas operative, one of the countless lies that the media outlets like Reuters have dutifully repeated and dignified." Zink went on, "Reuters' willingness to perpetuate Israel's propaganda has not spared their own reporters from Israel's genocide." But what exactly is a Hamas camera, or indeed a Nukba journalist? You might be tempted to think it's a camera that locates Israeli military positions to fire at, but you're wrong. The definition is much wider. It's one hinted at by Yehezkeli and others such as Andrew Fox, a former British para, who now parades under the title of researcher for the neoconservative Henry Jackson Society. Yehezkeli said, "Just think about how much damage these journalists, you can call them Nukba journalists, how much damage they have done to Israel." Fox wrote, after the assassination of Sharif, "There's a dangerous myth in modern conflict that combatant means a man with a rifle or a woman in a uniform." Fox suggested that had Sharif just been a journalist for Al Jazeera, that would still have been justification enough to kill him. Fox mused, when does a journalist become a legitimate military target? Maybe not often enough. Fox and Yehezkeli are blissfully unaware this is exactly the sort of stuff that Netanyahu doesn't want US President Donald Trump to hear. because a big chunk of the MAGA movement is leaving the sinking ship. Like the zealots they are, they can't stop themselves from blurting the truth that these journalists are dangerous to Israel precisely because they're doing their job effectively. Israel can't stand looking at itself in the full-size mirror these journalists in Gaza hold up to it day in, day out. Israel can't tolerate the images of emaciated children whose famine its planners and strategists methodically engineered. It can't stand the effect these images are having on global public opinion. Fox should think the next time he opens his mouth how many seconds he would last in front of Tucker Carlson or Piers Morgan. They would shred him to pieces. Because the opinion polls in the US are now consistent. A recent survey by Quinnipiac University found that 60% of voters disapprove of the US sending military aid to Israel, while 32% support additional aid. This, Politico reports, is the highest level of opposition and the lowest level of support for the US military alliance with Israel since the Hamas attack. Half of the voters surveyed, including 77% of Democrats, say they believe Israel is committing genocide. Those who oppose military aid to Israel now include former US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. This is a big shift in opinion in the one country that matters to Israel. It was on this very same terrain, thousands of miles away from the battlefield, that the Vietnam War was lost 5 decades ago. Like other genocidal regimes, Israel seeks to kill and starve Palestinians in silence, in an information blackout, while compliant media pour out a steady stream of propaganda aiming at dehumanizing the victims. The same thing happened during the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. The primary tools used to incite the Hutus to attack the Tutsi minority were the radio and the machete. It became known as radio genocide or death by radio. This is happening in Hebrew in Israel right now. As a result, a clear and consistent majority of Israelis believe there are no innocents in Gaza. The media was also integral to the genocide of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. Propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels systematically dehumanized the Jews, justified their persecution, and secured mass public support for murder. The concentration camps compelled prisoners to send postcards home saying they were being treated well. Concerts were filmed in Theresienstadt, after which the entire crew was sent to Auschwitz. Propaganda that Jews were being resettled in the East was critical to the Nazi regime's attempts to disguise its final solution in the gas chambers. Today, Israeli media are using the techniques of Goebbels in reporting negotiations with South Sudan as the destination for an evacuation of Palestinians in Gaza. Language normalizes genocide. Israel can only operate in Gaza with journalists under its total control, like the influencers who go in as embeds in Israeli army tanks. But the 5 journalists who died this week were made of stronger stuff. I want to say a few words about 2 of them, neither of whom worked for Middle East Eye. Mariam Dagga, a freelance reporter who worked with several media outlets including AP, rose to prominence with a personal tragedy. She filmed the death of a protester shot at the Gaza fence with Israel during the 2018 Great March of Return, only to discover that the man who bled to death in front of her was her brother. Her husband lives in the United Arab Emirates, and she had the opportunity to leave Gaza with him and their son Heath, but she chose to stay behind and continue to work as a photojournalist. Moaz Abu Taha was a journalist who helped Hearst conduct a virtual tour of the children's ward at Nasser hospital. The journalists who died on Monday, and every Palestinian journalist killed reporting this conflict, are role models of their profession. The rest of us, who have the luxury of working as journalists and staying alive, should bow our heads in their memory.